The men step back into the snow to consider their discovery. They give in to a moment of cautious celebration, comforted in the idea that their comrades have not perished, but are out there somewhere, perhaps in a snow cave. As the two scan the immediate landscape, not once does it cross their minds that a forsaken camp is cause for anything but hope. Yet they cannot begin to fathom the conditions that must have compelled their friends, all 9 of them, to abandon their only shelter and vanish into the stark cruelty of the Russian wilderness. Hi, I'm Desirae.
And I'm Mariah.
We're 2 sisters with a love of storytelling
and the paranormal. And you're listening to
As the Crow Flies.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to As the Crow Flies. We have found ourselves taking an extended trip in Russia. So we bounced over in our Chupacabra episode and decided to explore Baba Yaga. That brought us to the Dyatlov Pass incident. This is a true event that happened to a group of Russian hikers, backpackers, who found themselves in a situation way outside of what they were expecting. As we'll come to find out, it's still kind of unsure what exactly happened. But the people are very much real. The tragedy is all very real. And this kind of introduced myself and Desirae into the podcasting world, this story. I remember we were on a turkey trot one Thanksgiving, and Desirae brought it up to me as we were about at the halfway mark, was just telling me that she heard this really wild telling of this incident from the podcast Morbid. And that kind of sucked me in. That was my first instance with ever, listening to podcasts. I wasn't really into it before then, and have not left the world since, the podcasting world since. So it's been a while. I think that was 3-4 years ago when I first heard about this, and I'm excited to relearn what happened and explore some of the potential theories around what could have happened here.
I am really excited to dive back into this story. So this story, I first learned about, this incident in the now Dyatlov Pass, but in the Ural Mountains, through, like you said, Morbid, and it was their 3rd episode. And I remember at first I just was kind of haphazardly listening, like I tend to do to some podcasts, and catching bits and pieces. I was like, hold on, what is going on? And I finished listening to the episode. I had chills through my entire body because none of it made sense. And your mind could just go off in 100 directions. And so I had to re-listen to the episode. I deliberately chose to not go back and listen to the episode while doing the research for this one, because I didn't want any of my findings kind of be tainted from their perspective and their opinions. I want to let kind of us develop our own opinions. I mean, I've got my ideas of, well, could it be this or could it be this? And we're actually taking such a deep dive into this that we're going to be breaking this episode into 2 parts. So today I'm going to be covering the incident itself. But in order to kind of let our listeners wrap your minds around it, we're going to give you some time to let this information soak in before Mariah hits you with the theories for what could have happened here.
But don't worry, you don't have to wait a full 2 weeks for the second part of this. We are going to have a mini break, I guess, like a week in between to give us some time to get everything together and share the tail end of this and some of the many, many theories around how this happened.
The intro that you heard is an excerpt from one of the books that I used to find information from this incident, and that is the book titled Dead Mountain, The Untold True Story of the Dyatlov Pass Incident. And that is by Donnie Eichar. And that will be listed in our show notes today. So what is referred to as the Dyatlov Pass, it was not named the Dyatlov Pass until after this incident, and it's a pass that lies in the Ural Mountains, marking the boundary between the Komi Republic and the Sverdlovsk Oblast. At an elevation of 831 meters, or 2,726 feet above sea level, the pass is accessible only during the summer months, and even then requires a high clearance four-wheel drive vehicle. In the winter, travel along this unpaved route is possible only by snowmobile. Beginning in the town of Ivdel in Sverdlovsk Oblast and extending to the nomadic village of Ushma, the route spans approximately 125 kilometers or 78 miles. Beyond Ushma, the terrain becomes too steep and hazardous for vehicles, necessitating travel on foot. The pass is frequently subjected to severe weather, including heavy snowfall and sub-zero temperatures.
So that sounds treacherous already. Is that what's classified as like a class 4 road and then some in Vermont?
Yeah, so it seems really intense, which begs the question, why would these people decide to hike here in January?
Yeah.
January into February.
I don't want to go down my driveway in January.
No, not after this cold stretch that we're just getting off on. I can't wait to head to Florida soon. But so the reason why this group was traveling, so they had a purpose. This is another excerpt from Dead Mountain. This was a pivotal trip for Igor, who was the leader of the group, Igor Dyatlov, for Igor and his friends. They were all grade 2 hikers, but if this particular excursion went as planned, the group would be awarded grade 3 certification upon their return. It was the highest hiking certification in the country at the time, one that required candidates to cover at least 186 miles or 300 kilometers of ground, with a third of those miles being in challenging terrain. So this was just sort of what they needed to do in order to reach that grade 3. And I'm assuming here that they chose to kind of challenge themselves to do this in the winter time, especially to make sure that they could get that grade 3 certification.
Right. Leave no questions about it. We went above and beyond.
Exactly.
And I think it stands out that they're not beginners. Like they're not just random people who decided to go out on a whim. They had a purpose and they had likely prepared well for something like this.
Yeah, yes. And they definitely were prepared for this, which makes the incident that much more puzzling.
Mm-hmm.
So the group consisted of 10 people. Maybe you noticed in the intro, we mentioned 9 of them. We'll figure that out, kind of unveil why there was only 9 as we get into the story. But the group consisted of Igor Dyatlov. At age 23, he was the leader of the group, hence the name now being the Dyatlov Pass.
Mm-hmm.
There was also Zinaida or Zina Kulmagarova, Ludmila or Liuda Dubinina. At age 20, she was the youngest in the group. Then there was Yuri Yudin, and Yuri Yudin was one of three Yuris in the group. There was then Yuri Doroshenko, and this person will be referenced as Doroshenko throughout the story. Then there is Yorgi or Yuri Krivonishenko. Then Alexander Kolovatov, and he went by Kolovatov. Rustam Slobodin, who went by Rustic, and Nikolai or Kolya Thibaut Brignoles. Later joining the group would be Alexander Zolotaryov or Sasha. So those were the 10 members of this group, and they're referred to as the Dyatlov group. And again, we'll have their names listed in the show notes so that you can kind of follow along. It is kind of difficult at times to keep track of who we're talking about, but I will use their nicknames. That brings us into what happened. This story starts in January 1959 when this group of extremely well-versed, experienced students and recent graduates from the Ural Polytechnic Institute, now the Ural State Technical University, set out from Sverdlovsk in pursuit of summiting Otorten Mountain in the northern Ural Mountains and obtaining their Grade 3 hiker certification. Igor Dyatlov, age 23, was the leader of the group. Just days before the incident, the group busied themselves with preparation for their journey, none taking it more seriously than Igor himself, who packed his camera to document their excursion. Zina worked on an entry into her diary, while Liuda, the youngest of the group, waterproofed their funds for their trip in a tightly closed can. Yudin was tasked with packing the group's medicinal supplies, while Doroshenko, Yorgi, Kolovatov, Rustic, and Kolya were undergoing other preparations to ready themselves for this trek. When the group found themselves settled into the third-class train car, they noticed 37-year-old Alexander Zolotaryov, or Sasha, as he preferred, had joined them at the last minute. Sasha wound up joining this group when his previously intended expedition's timeline didn't suit his, and was subsequently turned to Igor and his group. As the train ventured toward their expedition, the group welcomed Sasha, and excitement grew for their trip. Zina's concluding thoughts on the day were recorded in her diary. "I wonder what awaits us in this hike. Will anything new happen? Oh yes, the boys have given a solemn oath not to smoke through the whole trip. I wonder how strong their willpower is. Will they manage without cigarettes? We are going to sleep, and Ural woods loom behind the windows." I love the way that she writes this, and also it's just crazy to me that, I mean, I guess maybe because they're young, but like these guys are extreme hikers. They're in pursuit of their Grade 3 hiking certification, and they're just doing that while smoking cigarettes.
Yeah.
I'm not even a smoker, and I'm lucky if I can make it up a flight of stairs.
I was gonna say I took Goose out the other day and like walked wrong in the snow somehow and messed my lower back up for a week. So
Yeah. And then these guys are just out there
different
smoking
lives.
cigarettes and hiking.
It's so sad though, looking back and like seeing the hope and excitement that she has. I'm sure that they all have for,
Yeah.
their trip.
Yeah, like it just knowing what we know now and
Yeah.
hearing her diary entries is like a punch to the gut, kind of.
Mhm.
Another little excerpt that I wanted to add to this part of the story is that they made a deliberate choice to buy fewer train tickets than people in their group. And
Oh.
Xena would often have to stow herself away under the seat
Oh my
to
god.
hide from the train conductor as he came through to punch tickets. And
What?
so she mentions that in some of her diary entries as well.
They were just short on money, or like literally just wanting to see if they could get away with it?
Yeah, it was like if we can get away with buying fewer tickets, why not?
Right.
I mean, they had
Well,
money. She was putting it away, stashing it away for their trip to
mhm.
use throughout the trip. So, I mean, maybe they were trying to save a little bit here and there, but basically it was just to see if they could get away with it.
I mean, we all do weird stuff in our early 20s, so
Yep, exactly. So on January 27th, after several days of various train and bus rides traveling to Ivedell, the group's hiking adventure finally began. The group diary tells of good weather and a nice break on horseback. It also mentions Yuri Yudin falling ill and ultimately departing from the group on January 28th after gathering some minerals to bring back to his university, leaving them with just 9 in their group. So that's how we get from the original 10 to 9. And Yuri is considered the only surviving member of the group.
that's got to be a rough feeling. I mean,
Yeah,
happy to be alive, but
survivor's guilt,
yeah.
right? Like if he wouldn't have gotten sick, would he have ended up like the rest of his group?
Yeah, or that little scratch in the back of your mind of like, could I have been there to
Help.
turn the tides? Yeah,
Yeah,
that's a lot
exactly.
scary.
So then 2 days later, on January 29th, or day 2 of their journey, they hiked the Lazva River to the Asupia River along a Mansai trail. Mansai comes up a lot. They're sort of native mountain people. And so when you hear Mansai, that's who we're referring to. As the month came to a close, the group wrote of worsening weather, with ice hindering their travels, and considerations of where they might set up their tents. On January 31st, the group added their final diary entry. They told of the weather increasingly worsening, with wind and snow reported. The group trekked the Mansai Trail following the steps of a deer hunter. The conditions favored disorientation as the trail was difficult to find, nonetheless navigate.
Mhm.
On the evening of this day is when the group elected to pitch their tent, build a fire, and get some rest. The diary entry reads, "Nice and warm. Can't imagine such comfort on the ridge with howling wind outside, hundreds of kilometers away from human settlements."
That happened fast.
Yeah. Their first day of their trip was on January 27th, like the first day of their hiking was on
Mhm.
January 27th, and the incident is presumed to have taken place February 1st, February 2nd. So their
Mhm.
final diary entry was on January 31st.
I can't imagine 4 days in, I'm sure feels when you're hiking in all of those conditions feels like forever.
Right.
And, you know, like, feeling like things are going so well, and, again, you said, like, nice and warm, spirits still seem high,
Yeah.
and I'm sure they're like, "Oh, we're this much closer to that goal," that, what is it, level 3 certification,
Hmm.
and just silence after.
Yes. So on February 1st, there was no diary entry, but it was presumed that the group set out again, setting up their tent just 10 miles from Mount Otorten. The group ate their final dinner between 6 and 7 p.m., and investigators determined 1 or 2 of the group members must have dressed and left the tent to relieve themselves at some point in the evening. This is because they were found with more clothes on than other members of the group. The group of 9 was expected to return from their journey on February 13th, 1959. As the days extended beyond the 13th of February, the group's families began to grow increasingly worried. Rustic's father, Professor Vladimir Slobodin, contacted the UPI Sports Club searching for answers, but got nowhere when the club director, Lev Gordo, was away on a trip himself. 2 more days passed as calls flooded in from worried family members. The families were told that the group is no more than delayed, supposedly due to a reported snowstorm from another returned group of hikers who had made contact with the Dyatlov team weeks prior. The search and rescue mission was even further delayed after a false report of a telegram received from the Dyatlov's team was generated in an attempt to calm Lyuda and Kolovatov's families.
That's really shitty.
Yeah. Yep. They're like, oh, it's okay. We got a telegram from them. They're fine. They weren't.
Obviously. And like 1959, they don't have an iPhone in their pocket to keep in touch with people.
Mm.
In just like trying to think of what I would feel like if my son was in a group like that, and I'm, you know, they should be back any day. It'll be fine.
Right. And especially like parents of adults like you and I mean, you're almost,
Yeah.
Gabe's 13, but how torn you must feel as a parent to like, I need to trust that my kid is out there. I mean, they're a grade 2 certified hiker. They know what they're doing.
Mhm.
They're safe. They're just held up by snow. And all of a sudden, things are getting longer and longer and longer. And then the panic is like really setting in of where is my kid?
Yeah, I'm not just being dramatic now. Something must be wrong.
Yeah. I couldn't imagine. I don't want to imagine.
No.
The first search team was not deployed until February 20th, 7 days after their expected return date. And now we know, 21 days after their final diary entry.
Mm-hmm.
And this search happened at the pressure of the families. The rescue team increased in size on February 22nd as prison guards and other officers began to join the search party for the Dyatlov group. Subsequent groups were formed, and local volunteer Mansai hunters aided the search efforts as well. On February 23rd, a search group was dropped near Mount Otorten, which was the anticipated final destination for the missing group. After a day of hiking, the search group determined that the Dyatlov group never made it that far. Then, on February 25th, Boris Slobstov and his search party happened upon a trail of skis, assumed to be from the Dyatlov group. And this is where the excerpt comes from at the beginning of the story. So this trail of skis gave him hope.
Right.
Following the ski trail, they came upon the remnants of a tent the next day on February 26th on the slope of Kholat Syakhl in what is now known as the Dyatlov Pass. Having helped construct the tent himself 3 years prior, Slobstov recognized the tent immediately as belonging to the Dyatlov group. The tent was found mangled with slashed sides. Initially, it was concluded that some vandals must have surprised and attacked the hikers as they slept. It was not until a seamstress who was called to mend investigator Vladimir Korotev's uniform noted that the tent was slashed from the inside out. Forensic examination later corroborated the seamstress observation. So she was able to identify that the way that the fibers were disconnected, like it wasn't torn or ripped or anything, but it was slashed with a blade. And the I guess angle of the cut made it evident to her, as someone who works with fabric regularly,
Right.
That it was cut from the inside out.
That has got to be like a gut-wrenching observation or realization.
Yeah.
I guess similar to where investigators can tell like if a window was broken, was it broken from the outside in or the inside out, regardless of where the glass ended up.
Right.
How did it fracture? That
Yeah.
I thought that could be done with fabric too, but I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense knowing that she, works with fabric regularly, like she would have an eye for that.
Yeah.
But what an ominous finding, like, because, with the initial, oh, they were just jumped by vandals, you're thinking that it's being cut from the vandals inside, but what's happening that is putting these experienced hikers in such a panicked state of mind that they're cutting themselves out of a tent.
But and my thought too was like they're in such a difficult terrain that like I found it really hard to believe that vandals would have gone that far to hopefully come across hikers to then rob, or unless maybe they were just like opportunistic, but like were they really expecting to find other groups out there
Right.
that weren't just hiking with a purpose or
And you'd have to be pretty dedicated vandals to go in this harsh environment as
to
far up
achieve
as they were.
people be people in, but that just feels like a
Yeah.
stretch.
hmm and so to also dismiss the vandals theory, they found a lot of things left at the tent site.
Hmm.
So accompanying the tent were a pair of skis stacked neatly at the campsite near a pad of flattened snow. At the bottom of the tent lay 9 backpacks, still neatly packed, with jackets, raincoats, shoes, pants, boots, warm fur coats, socks, hats, ski caps, utensils, buckets, a stove, an axe, a saw, as well as blankets and food. Inside the tent, investigators also discovered Igor's camera, along with 2 others, and the group diary. Outside of the tent lay Igor's own jacket. Later, crews also located his flashlight about 100 yards from the tent, which was still in working condition, along with 710 rubles and train tickets for the group. The tent had been vacant long enough for 15 to 20 centimeters of blown snow to have accumulated on the northern facing portion. The scene, aside from the shoes appearing a bit disheveled, depicted a calm, quiet evening among the group, even leaving them time to write a satirical propaganda pamphlet that included a science section discussing the existence of the Yeti. The pamphlet included the line, according to recent reports, Yeti lives in the northern Ural near Mount Otorten. And so we'll include the English transcripted version of their leaflet, but it's pretty telling of like how laid back their last night was. Um,
Hmm.
which if anything is a little maybe comforting to know that they were just having a good time before everything happened.
Right. They're enjoying each other's company. They're there doing what they love, and
Yeah.
hopefully
Having
the
some
family
good
found some comfort there.
Yeah, they're just having some good laughs with good friends and
Yep. Also, I love like they're talking, thinking about, the Yeti. Where are they? It feels very like kindred spirit, kind of,
right.
minus the hiking.
Yeah. Yeah, leave that out for me. So, unfortunately, there was some really poor forensic evidence.
Mm.
Kind of from the excerpt at the beginning, no one was expecting to be investigating deaths here. So, shoddy forensic evidence of the characteristic columns of pressed snow identifying footprints led investigators to believe that the group walked single file, descending down the mountain toward the cedar trees. It was really hard to differentiate whose footprints were whose because everyone had kind of trampled all over the scene. And so it was really difficult to tell where footprints would have been from the group versus from investigators. Another thing I wanted to share is that in the mountains, in snow, footprints are raised. So they're not like the sunken in footprints that we would think of.
I was wondering when you said columns.
Yeah, so it's actually pretty interesting when when the person when they step on the snow and they compact the snow, it makes it less able to be weathered away and eroded away by the wind and
Oh,
other loose snow. So it preserves it as a raised column. And so that's what investigators were able to find.
that's gonna look really strange, but
Yeah.
that's cool to know.
Of the group who had exited the tent, only one person appeared to be in boots. The others were only in socks or barefoot entirely. And
Whoa.
so, with that finding, I want to remind you of how harsh this trail is in the winter. We've got sub-zero temperatures, heavy snowfall, lots of ice, and experienced hikers. So, what would cause them to slash out of their tent from the inside and go out into this desolate, frigid, icy, snowy Russian wilderness
Right.
with no shoes or socks on?
Also, the way that some of this feels so specifically organized against the like frenzied trying to get out of the tent, but then all of their clothing and items are folded and neatly put to the side, said that they looked like they were walking away in a single
Single
file
file. Yeah.
line. All of that sounds totally off kilter with being in a panic and trying to just like hurriedly leave this tent barefoot.
Yeah.
Why?
This is the part of the story where I was like, none of this makes sense.
Yeah. It sounds like somebody took bits and pieces of like, oh, this sounds pretty outlandish. This sounds ridiculous. Let me just add this Mod Podge of information. How do you make sense of that?
Right. Yeah. And they're experienced hikers. They know better. They know better than to leave and put themselves at an increased risk of hypothermia or frostbite or anything like that. So stuff has to be really intense for them to do that.
Yeah. Or just something's very wrong.
Right. Yeah, exactly. It was after the discovery of the final campsite and the ominous footprints that local forester Ivan Pashin suggested the group ought to drink for the dead rather than the living. This sentiment was ill received by the search party, and they pretty well beat him up. They're like, don't you say that about our friends. Our friends aren't dead. They're out there
Mhm.
somewhere. They're too smart to be dead, basically.
Harsh, but also you can see where he's coming from. Maybe not the best audience to share that thought with, but
Yeah. It seems like he is catching on that something's really got to be wrong here.
yep.
The reality was that the group had left without the essential supplies needed to survive in this harsh and desolate landscape. It was concluded that, quote, only an exceptionally serious threat might motivate a group of 9 young and physically fit people to urgently leave their shelter in the winter evening in a completely uninhabited forest, end quote. And that came from one of the investigators.
Mhm.
On February 27th, the bodies of Doroshenko, Georgi, Igor, and Zina were discovered. This is 7 days into the search. They finally found the first 4 bodies. A student in the search party stated, quote, next to the bodies was a fire. Nearby were more than 10 small fir tree branches cut with a finished knife. The lower dry branches had been cut from the cedar. Some of these were lying next to the fire. The snow around was trampled. Captain Chernyshev official statement disclosed, quote, it's possible to conclude that other people had since been by the fire. We found various garments next to it rather than on the bodies, but we didn't find any other bodies. The trees near the fire had been cut with knives, but we found no knives with the bodies, end quote.
All that sounds really troubling.
Very ominous. And so I am going to give a trigger warning here. There are some graphic postmortem descriptions that are going to be coming up, but I think it's important in understanding why there's so much mystery shrouding this incident.
Mhm.
So listen cautiously if you're not about hearing, these descriptions. I understand and respect that decision, and you can fast forward for a bit, but we are going to be describing those just to paint the picture of what is going on and to kind of help you understand why we're so curious about what happened.
Right.
All right. So Doroshenko's body was found nude, aside from doubled up socks, and frozen, laying atop a pile of cedar branches. His face was covered in snow, making him difficult to identify. Doroshenko's hand was also burned, and his ear, lips, and nose were covered in blood. Yorgi was found in a similar state nearby. His right leg was distinctly missing a sock and shoe, and his left only bore a single tattered brown sock. The assumed mate to this sock was discovered half burned next to their fire that was close by to where the bodies were discovered. The backs of his hands were torn, and there was blood between his fingers. His index finger was also pretty injured. His left shin was skinned, and blood had covered his leg. Autopsies in Ivedell led medical examiners to still assume freezing as the cause of death, though there were some things that were still puzzling to them. Doroshenko had experienced a pulmonary edema. So basically, what happens is when sub-zero air gets into your lungs, it causes your air sacs to explode, and then blood builds up in your lungs. This condition is also seen, from people with a heart disease. But when we think about people who are outside in those cold temperatures, that's what they mean when they talk about a pulmonary edema. So symptoms of this include severe sudden shortness of breath, coughing up a pink frothy sputum, and chest pain. It requires urgent medical treatment such as oxygen therapy, which he obviously couldn't get.
Right.
And so I'm guessing maybe that's why they chalked his cause of death up to freezing. But the other things don't make sense. Why would the backs of his hands be torn up? Why would his shin be skinned with like exposed bone? These deaths were graphic.
Yeah.
So I don't get how they call it freezing to death.
And with obviously his hands were torn up, but with blood on his fingers and stuff too, I wonder if any of that was self-inflicted, not like purposefully trying to hurt himself, but if there was some kind of mental situation going on that perhaps he's like scratching at himself or injuring himself in this state, like not being in the right state of mind.
Yeah. And he was also found with a self-inflicted bite wound on his own knuckle. So like when I hear that, it makes me think of like you're nervous and so you're like biting on yourself, or maybe he was trying to keep himself quiet, or maybe he was trying to distract his mind from pain elsewhere in his body by inflicting pain somewhere else, like maybe what you're mentioning.
Yeah, like when I think of that, it's like biting down on that or like a stick or something when somebody's trying to fix another wound or like pop something back into place, stitch something up.
Yeah. And one of the more puzzling pieces about the state that Yorgi was found in was he was discovered to have third-degree burns, but those burns occurred post-mortem. So whether that was someone burned him, maybe after he had died, he was too close to the fire and the fire kept going because there was a fire nearby. But something to consider, how did he get these post-mortem, these after-death third-degree burns? When they found Igor's body, it was determined that he had been vomiting blood at the time of his death. So maybe similar to the pulmonary edema that Yorgi had experienced. And Xena was found with a baton-shaped bruise at her waist.
That's odd.
Yeah.
And just like totally different from anything else going on.
Right. As we get into theories a little bit, maybe that'll get touched on. So further investigation of this scene revealed that someone in the group had climbed the tree nearby, clearing branches up to 5 meters high, dropping them below, assumingly to feed the fire, though they were never used. The bodies were also found to have been manipulated post-mortem, but the way in which they were manipulated showed care and respect. So the investigators wondered if it was the then surviving members of the group, maybe, who had moved them. But it was determined that they were moved after death because the livor mortis on Doroshenko's back didn't match the position that his body was found in, which was face down.
And that livor mortis, that's like the blood pooling in your
Yes.
body, right?
Yes. Yeah. So exactly like you said, livor mortis, when someone passes away in a certain position, their blood isn't circulating anymore. So it'll pool in those lowest points. And so he had livor mortis on his back, which wouldn't make sense if he died face down.
Right.
If he died face down, he would have livor mortis on the front of his body. The bodies of two of the men were laid next to each other after their deaths, like I mentioned. And so the way that they were positioned led the investigators to assume that it was their friends who did that. And because of how neat the scene was, it didn't seem like it was frenzied or like someone who had nothing to do with the group had manipulated the scene in any way. Ultimately, these deaths were attributed to hypothermia, and foul play was not suspected. I'm going to guess that it had to do with the pulmonary edemas, which was why they chalked it up to hypothermia, but you just can't discredit these other injuries.
Part of me wonders too, so knowing that somebody had been like climbing into the tree to clear branches, I wonder maybe if Zena's bruising could have been result of a fall, climbing up and then just coming down on your waist onto
or even Yorgi's leg, with it being skinned and blood covering the bottom of it. Like maybe he fell out of the tree. I hadn't considered that before. That could make sense. So after the discoveries of these bodies on February 27th, the next bodies were not found until March 5th. On March 5th, Rustic's body was found. His autopsy was troubling. They found head trauma that was the result of an excessive force from an exterior source. So it was nothing that he could have done to himself. It couldn't have been from a fall. The force was immense that was put onto his head. He had some severe skull fractures. Lyuda, Kolovatov, Kolya, and Sasha's bodies were discovered months after their deaths by a Mansai native and his dog. Their bodies were found in May. So we found Rustic's body in March, and then now not until May, the last bodies were found. And the way that these bodies were found really flipped the entire investigation on its head. So the Mansai native discovered these bodies after he noticed some cut branches that were forming sort of like a trail. He and his dog followed the trail where they found a pair of black cotton sweatpants about 50 meters or 164 feet from the cedar line. The right leg of the pants had been cut away with a knife. Remember, they still haven't found this knife that is cutting the branches and the clothing. Cedar and fir branches lay about the scene. Among the branches, the Mansai native also found the left half of a light brown woman's wool sweater. Investigators determined this garment belonged to Lyuda. Lyuda was also found with Yorgi's sweatpants and sweater. This area was referred to as the den throughout the rest of the investigation. Found in the den were the bodies of Lyuda kneeling with her body pressed against a rock. There are actual images of these bodies and how they were found.
Oh.
The best way I can describe it is it looks like she was running away from something. So like think of in a movie when there's like an explosion behind someone and their arms go flailing and their chest kind of protrudes forward.
Okay.
That's what it looks like when you see Liuda's body. Like her arms are up, her chest and face are pressed against the rock, and her knees are bent below her.
Oh, wow.
And so again, you're just questioning what could have caused her to perish this way. There was also water that was dripping down the rock face that her face was on and was dripping into her mouth. Whether that plays into things at all is unclear, but it's notable that there was a brown liquid found in her stomach.
Okay.
And I don't think they could determine whether that was there from postmortem or before she had died, but they found it and noted it in the autopsy. Then Kolovatov and Sasha were found in an embrace, and Kolya was just downstream of the rest of the bodies. All but one of the bodies in the group were found to have sustained forces that you would expect to see as a result of a car crash. So they were intense forces that were put upon these bodies. They were all found with head and skull fractures, and they had broken ribs of varying degrees as well. But basically, they were crushed. So the den discovery undermined the leading theory investigators had up until this point, which was sort of their way of explaining why, they would have left barefoot, why bodies were found nude, why bodies were found lacking clothes. And so that was presumed to be the result of paradoxal undressing. And so that's something that happens in the final stages of hypothermia, where those people who are experiencing hypothermia feel a certain degree of warmth throughout their body, kind of like a self-preservation thing that your brain is doing, but it makes you think that you're hot. And so a lot of times when people get to these final stages of hypothermia, you'll find that they've removed their clothes because they think that they're hot, when in reality they're freezing to death.
Yeah, I've heard about that before, and it's like you said, it's just your mind almost like playing tricks on you, not to injure yourself anymore, but like it doesn't know what's going on. Things are so wrong that it's just going haywire.
Yeah, because now that they found the den, it alludes to the fact that the members of the group were thinking enough to have found a shelter in a ravine, which would have kept them away from the wind, and also provides a level of insulation. And then to increase their insulation, they cut away those cedar and fir branches and use that to create a barrier on top of the snow so that the snow wouldn't take their body warmth away.
Right.
They had that insulating layer. And so there's investigators have determined, like, okay, if the group is thinking enough to do these things, they were not in the hysteria stage of hypothermia, not enough to be experiencing this paradoxal undressing that they were initially kind of using as the considering as the reason why they would be found in the varying levels of nudity that they were found.
Right. Well, and thinking back to the first group that was found too, they were found by a fire.
Right.
And they seemed to be more or less clothed, weren't they? Or the first one was
found nude. Yeah.
But and so in not as undressed as you'd expect the entire group to be in that case,
right.
And trying to warm themselves actively.
Yeah.
And then caring for the bodies after passing.
Right.
I guess I would assume you wouldn't be in that much of a like sense of reality or empathy to be taking care of others if you're so far gone that you're undressing in
right
extreme weather conditions like that.
Yeah, exactly. And so now that the paradoxal undressing is kind of off of the table, now investigators are just left reeling in what the hell happened here?
Mhm.
And how did these, especially this third group that was found, what could cause this extreme amount of force to these bodies?
Right. The only thing that comes to mind is like an avalanche, but the areas that they're being found in don't look like they incurred the damage that you would expect from an
Right.
avalanche.
Yeah, and they weren't, buried deep beneath snow. I mean, this last group was found in May, so they were found after some snow had melted, but if there was an avalanche, it would be, maybe they would never be found because they'd be under so much snow. And another thing to kind of refute the avalanche idea is that they were in the trees. They were in the tree lines. And so you don't typically think of an avalanche happening in the tree lines because you have those trees to kind of act as brace points to keep that snow packed together.
Right. Unless it's like coming from far up and passing through the trees, but then
Right.
speed and the amount of snow being held back from other trees, a whole bunch of other factors that it just doesn't make sense in my mind that this wall of snow would have done the damage to kill these people.
Right. Yeah. So in addition to the initial findings from February, March, and May of 1959, investigator Lev Ivanon's article titled The Mystery of the Fireballs, which wasn't published until 30 years after the incident in an attempt to draw attention back to the case after it had gone cold, reported that when Lev and another investigator returned to the site of the incident in May, there were several young trees found with traces of burning along the forest tree line. These scorched trees were perceived to be out of place as there was no apparent concentric shape and no epicenter to the burn.
Mm-hmm.
The snow in the area had not melted, and the trees were not excessively damaged. The burns were reportedly selective and did not happen in a natural or organized way. So Lev quotes, "It seemed like when the hikers walked on their feet more than 500 meters down from the mountain, someone dealt with some of them as direct targets. Found frozen to the bark of the scorched trees were their frozen skin, presumably from their inner thighs, along with scraps of underwear."
What?
Yeah. And this information, oddly enough, was not released to the public initially. This information didn't come out until Lev's article was published 30 years later.
It feels like there's so much weight to that.
Yeah. And I mean, take it with a grain of salt because you have to remember he is doing this in to bring attention back to the case. So is this just some hyperbole to get people, questioning things again? Maybe it did happen, but you have to consider the fact that if this really was found, why are we waiting 30 years to mention it?
Yeah, that seemed like a big piece of the puzzle in
Yeah.
that case.
And I mean, without going too much into theories, you have to think about the investigation and slow release of information and not wanting to give too much information away because if they are, but I mean, they're saying that no foul play is suspected, but are they trying to keep things close, as Morbid would say, close to the breast or close to the vest?
All I can think of is hot dogs in a trench coat, and that is not that's not what you're thinking about at all.
I think it's close to the vest. Yeah, it's just weird that this doesn't come out until 30 years later.
Yes. It feels very opposite of the no foul play, and yeah, maybe trying to lull somebody into a false sense of security and like have somebody slip up because they don't think they're being investigated, but I don't know.
So that is the incident of the Dyatlov Pass, where sadly 9 experienced hikers' lives were cut very unfairly short, you know? So it's hard to even say that they died doing what they loved. I mean, you can hold on to the hope of that, but really it
Yeah.
seems like they experienced some hellish things
Yeah.
in their final moments.
The one thing, I mean, aside from Rustic, most of them still being in a group, hopefully kind of comforting each other, even if they have the idea that, we're not making it out of this, but for the most part, not being alone, not being completely abandoned in a sense out in this
Yeah.
wilderness.
Yeah, they had each other
Mhm.
um, for the most part. And so to conclude this episode, I want to reread the names and end with a poem written by Yorgi. So in conclusion, these 9 individuals who lost their lives were Igor Dyatlov, Zina Kulmagarova, Liuda Dubinina. Yuri Yudin was the surviving member of the group because he fell ill. But there was also Yuri Doroshenko, Yorgi Yuri Krivonishenko, Alexander Kolovatov, Rustam Rustic Slobodin, Nikolai Kolya Thibaut Brignoles, and Alexander Sasha Zolotaryov. And Yorgi's New Year's poem, written in early January 1959, so the same year that he passed, reads, "Hello, everyone. Happy New Year, hiking friends. Let me wish you camping in faraway mountains, ascending summits in the wild. Let your backpacks be light, weather always fine, winter not too cold, and summer to be mild. The dirt not to bother you, the sugar not to get wet when the river is boiling and you go overboard. Pants not to shred into tatters so you can patch them and go after drying your jacket at night to have left more than a sleeve. Your shoes to be good, not a year, but dozens of years. Wish you to leave your tracks all over the map of Russia." And so, with all of the mystery that we've left you with this week, we will only make you wait one more week to dive into some of the wild theories behind what could have caused all of this.
And cannot say we will leave you with any definitive answers. It is all still up in the air of what could have happened to cause this tragedy. But hopefully you can hold on to that spirit of adventure that this group of travelers had, this group of hikers, and I don't know if wanderlust is the right word, but just the desire to see the beauty of the world and to share that with others and to just experience the world around them.
I do like the term wanderlust. You know, they loved to explore.
Mhm.
They loved to challenge themselves. They, even the going without smoking cigarettes, like that's a challenge. Can we do this? They just
Mhm.
had these really strong mindsets, and that's admirable. And so while we do encourage you to check out Morbid's 3rd episode, I would suggest you wait. Don't do it
Yes,
until after our 2nd
it's a
part
little
of this.
confusing.
Yeah, because if you've never heard of this story before, I don't want you to get any preconceived notions. I just we designed this episode in a way to kind of let this information fester and to allow your mind to try to grapple with this while also running wild with these different possibilities. And
Mhm.
we've kind of left little cookie crumbs here and there throughout the telling of the incident itself, and intentionally so, to kind of get your mind turning before part 2.
We will see you guys soon. Thank
Yes.
you, Desirae, for sharing this, and I can't wait to round it out for everyone next week.
Yes, I'm looking forward to hearing these theories.
If you have any theories of your own, or you have come across some interesting stories yourself of the unknown, the mysterious, the macabre, please reach out. We would love to hear from you.
Reach out to us at asthecrowflies.pod@gmail.com with any stories you want to share. Okay, sorry. I went to say it. Okay.
Okay, let me start over. I think I've got it.
Your mom?